John Milton's Sonnet 19 is generally titled by the first line of the poem, "When I Consider How My Light is Spent," which is a remarkable document for a remarkable man. It's a great testament of faith in the face of personal tragedy, an individual perspective right there. It's a great document of theology, quite frankly, of the official Puritan position, as opposed to reacting to Catholic dogma, but also of a certain political bent, a certain democratizing intent in England at the time of the Puritan Revolution, of which Milton was a big part, working in the government. It's one of his more anthologized poems. It's a sonnet. It's fairly simple and short to get through. It's roughly Petrarchan and a little bit of a oddity here and there. But it's very complicated. So for people who say, well, I got to read Milton, I don't feel like swallowing all of Paradise Lost, they'll sometimes glide over to this and say, well, okay, I can handle this. But there's a lot going on in that. It is concentrated. And on the surface, it seems like a fairly quiet poem, but it belies an awful lot of activity going on beneath the surface, which is part of the point. When I consider how my light is spent ere half my days in this dark world and wide, and that one talent which is death to hide lodged in me useless, though my soul more bent to serve therewith my Maker, and present my true account, lest he returning chide, doth God exact day labor, light denied? I fondly ask. But patience to prevent that murmur soon replies, God doth not need either man's work or his own gifts. Who best bear his mild yoke, they serve him best. His state is kingly. Thousands at his bidding speed and post o'er land and ocean without rest. They also serve who only stand and wait. Which is a odd little dynamic. It's a very, like I say, it's really quite a quiet poem, but you can see there's some significant hooks in this. When I consider how my light is spent. Excuse me. Here he's playing on a couple of little definitions of spent, I would say, and also light. The example that jumps to mind, or the fact of his biography that jumps to mind first, would be his blindness. This is coming basically by this point he has lost pretty much all of his vision, and for him this is a great tragedy. He is a writer, but he is also a translator. He is fluent in multiple languages, all the ancients, Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, and and also obviously Italian, Spanish, French, and a number of others, and sometimes relative fluency perhaps, but this is a great skill to have serving the government. And it's suddenly he can't really read. This is way before Braille. He cannot read documents anymore. So this is something that is a bit of a challenge for him, having value in the government. And so you get this sense of, well, light, his ability to discern light from darkness, his ability to see is right there in the very first line. This is very significant. And you can read it just on that level. You can read it just on that biographical level of somebody who's just sort of complaining, like, why? Why do I have to lose? This sucks for me. But I really think there's some more going on here. Ere half my days in this dark world and wide, and that one talent which is death to hide. One talent, and capitalizes the T, and puts a little emphasis on that word. And there he's kind of referencing the gospel according to Matthew. I think it's Matthew 25, the parable of the talents, which is a story of a master and his slaves, and essentially it has to do with economy and the taking of an investment and building on it, as opposed to just burying it in the ground and doing nothing with it. And for the Puritans, of course, economy is kind of it's a significant issue. Here you can see him as a good Puritan, sort of focusing in on that parallel. Now, the theology is never terribly far from Milton's intents in any of it, or put aside intents. It's all baked into everything he wrote, but I don't want to get lost in that. What's interesting, I think, is that you see him dealing with this idea that he has a talent. Now, a talent is his ability to write, certainly, his ability to translate, also to read. So it's reading and writing, which are two very separate things. A talent is also, in the parable, a unit of money. Essentially, it's a coin, or it's currency. So there are these double meanings that are coming up there, and his currency in the world, as far as he seems to see it, or at least as far as the speaker in the poem seems to see it. I'm not going to go into what he might have thought, because that's a whole other ballgame. His currency in the world is his skill with language, his ability to write, and his ability to read. And this is threatened. He does overcome. He does continue to write. He composes to his daughter or whatever. But this is a great blow to him, and he's having a little existential crisis, let's say, of saying, well, why me? I have this one gift, and it is now lodged inside me, and I don't know how to share it. I don't know how to use it. I don't know what to do with it. And he is concerned that that God will rebuke him, as the parable in Matthew kind of suggests, that if you are given something and you don't make something of it, that's a kind of a sin. That's a waste, and the Puritans do not like wastefulness. So he's dwelling on this, and he even admits, he imagines a bit of a conversation going on here. A little dialogue breaks out, and he says, "I fondly," which here means foolishly, "I foolishly ask, but patience." Patience as an allegorical figure steps in. Patience is personified, if you will. To prevent that murmur, soon replies. Goth doth not need either man's work or his own gifts. Who best bear his mild yoke, they serve him best. His state is kingly. So here, this is a little doctrinal shutdown here. Patience is saying, okay, you can't do what you think you need to do to honor God. But a key aspect of Puritan theology is that it is faith alone that endears you to God, or that is the mark of the true Christian, rather. But that works. Your efforts on earth, and the things you do as a human being during your lifetime, actually do not matter at all. This is, of course, one of the big sticking points of the entire Protestant Reformation, and specifically the Puritan movement, where they reject the notion of you can do anything to sway God's mind. It doesn't matter what you do on earth. primarily they're talking about the purchase of indulgences, the idea that you can buy your way into heaven, or that, I was a good person, I tried, I ate all my vegetables and cleaned up after myself, and so God should reward me. The idea that you can influence God in that instance, and here he's saying no, that is absolutely not the case. The either God's man does not need God doth not need either man's work or his own gifts. God is imperious. God is, what you do is irrelevant. What you do is, totally beneath God's radar. The notion here is that maybe you're making too much of yourself. Maybe you're dwelling too much on yourself. And the self-pitying attitude of, why is God doing this to me? Suggests a certain self-importance, like God cares about you in the slightest, or, does God really notice you? God is, a few pegs up on the hierarchy. You're just, he's above your pay grade. So that sense of the objectification of God is right there, which is pure Puritanism right there. But also, think about that word that he uses. His state is kingly. Kingly. There's a lot of politics going on in this poem as well. There's a lot of interesting dynamics going on. The idea of here the king is somewhat above everything else. God is king. Okay, but does that mean king is God? The king is God? Now remember, the Puritans famously got rid of a king, and Milton was part of that. So there's that troubling relationship there of, well, what are we saying there? Are we saying that the king is God? Is God speaking through the king? What is the relationship to the king? Is the king just so above everything else that he shouldn't be involved in ordinary affairs? Maybe we want to set up like a little figurehead king, and then we take care of the rest of the stuff. There's an awful lot going in there that you can puzzle out, but really never find any resolution. But in that, you get this real, almost democratizing theme. Thousands at his bidding speed and post o'er land and ocean without rest. They also serve who stand and wait. God can move thousands of people this way, that way, whatever. God has all of that. They are all serving God in their own way, in that way. But also those who don't, which is in one way really a beautiful image of, you don't have to speed all over the world. You don't have to do everything. You don't have to you don't have to be able to read and write to earn God's grace, or you can't earn God's grace, but to deserve God's grace. There's no literacy test for grace. But those who stand and wait, it doesn't matter what you do. You don't have to do anything. All you have to do is stand and wait. And what are you waiting for? Well, you're waiting for something that you imagine is coming. And that is a sign of faith. Faith, not works. Faith, not what you do. It doesn't matter what you do. It's a matter of who you are on the inside. And the inside is that talent that he feels he cannot share, that light that does not shine on the rest of the world, perhaps on the outside world, which also then reflects back to his greater glory as an individual, John Milton. But the light within, the faith within, that has the true value. It can't be seen. Everybody else is as blind as you are, John Milton. But that faith within is visible to God. The light that God can see. When I consider how my light is spent, Now, on one definition, spent can be like it has been burnt out. You know, a candle is spent when its wick is gone, or when the oil in a lamp dries up. That means spent. But also how it is used, how it is dispersed, or how your light is valued. The action of spending. Is he writing for the glory of God, or is he writing for the reflected glory on himself? How is his light spent? There are no answers to any of this. This is all way, way out there in the ether. But these are the exact questions that burned within Milton, and within the broader Puritan movement as a whole. But you can see also these interwoven interests of the deeply personal, of somebody just, feeling like they have no value all of a sudden. They've lost their purpose in life. But that human value is overlaid with a theological value, a mode of interpreting what's going on here that is strictly for deep textual biblical exegesis. But infused with all of that, you get this political concept of an England that is in the throes of a kind of democratic revolution, where they have deposed a king and they are trying to centralize the government a little bit, so that it's you can make this argument about Cromwell a million different ways, but so that it is less caught up in the hierarchy. And remember, this great anti-hierarchy throughout the Protestant Revolution. They reject the Catholic Church primarily, or not primarily, but largely because of the authority structure that it did. And Puritanism was the exact opposite of that. They tried to flatten everything out instead of having a pope and the cardinals and all of these others, and the bishops and the priests and all of these different hierarchies built into society. They tried to get rid of that and just say, well, okay, we're going to have a circle of friends, and we're going to, we're not going to set one above the other. We're not going to try and stand out in any way. And that's the vision you get in this poem. The idea of not trying to stand out, the idea of just being part of the group and trusting to God's wisdom to determine value. All of that is going on in this poem, and it is so rich and it's so much fun, quite frankly, that it's a concentrated punch. So for everybody who gets a little intimidated by Paradise Lost, oh my God, how can I take that on? This is something different, but it's not necessarily any easier, because it's so concentrated. It'll stick with you. So if you think that you can read this poem and just get it over with and say, okay, I got that, and it's, way shorter than Paradise Lost, this will stick with you just as long. It's got that much.